Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Hugh Freeze, the Auburn Tigers kicking off fall camp this week. They'll want to dive into a few storylines that the boys are going to be following for this Auburn program over the next couple of weeks. And this is one of those programs that you got to just be fired up for fall camp to kick off. We've been, very vocal. You talk about some of the most improved teams at the Power 4 level. I think Auburn is one of those teams at the top of the list. You look at the amount of talent that is coming into this Auburn program heading into 2024. Not only the true freshmen that the boys are fired up about, a lot of really good additions in the transfer portal as well. A lot of position battles, a lot of potential breakout players over the next couple of weeks. Want to get into a few of the biggest storylines. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Auburn Tiger fans. It's been a blast over the last, 72 hours talking this program on the recruiting trail. The amount of support the Auburn fans continue to show to the fellas, it's been absolutely amazing. We can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, breakout players, storylines, position battles that you guys are following. Would love to hear that in the comment section, because again, that's what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks. And Dill, without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with what I think is the biggest storyline for this Auburn program. The boys, we were very vocal that it just wasn't good enough at the wide receiver position all of last year. I mean, anytime you have your tight end leading as your pass catcher, that's not a good sign in terms of what your wide receivers are. And hey, I ain't taking a shot at Rivaldo Fairweather, one of the better tight ends in the SEC. But again, the wide receiver play was not good enough. It is a completely transformed unit heading into 2024. Dill, what I'll ask you is, you got a bunch of newcomers coming into this program. You can't answer with Cam Coleman because the Auburn fans have heard enough about him. And now the boys love Cam Coleman. But again, let's give some love to some other players in this wide receiver room. One wide receiver that you see step up for this Auburn program in fall camp.
I mean, it's probably an obvious one, but I think Keandre Lambert-Smith. I think even if you let me say Cam Coleman, I might still say Keandre Lambert-Smith, because I know everyone's talking about Cam Coleman. I want to talk about Cam Coleman. I can't wait to see him be a guy who can be explosive and look a little bit unique. I think that's the one thing you lacked with Auburn last year, was anybody who was like truly dynamic, really able to just play a high-level wide receiver one position. But when I look at Keandre Lambert-Smith, I don't think we've seen a tenth of what he can be, given that he was just constrained in an offense at Penn State that just lacked any sort of creativity, lacked any sort of desire to get their big dogs involved in the offense in a unique way. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith, his ability to separate and run really good routes and kind of be that true, really great number two. I don't think he'll be the vertical threat that a Cam Coleman can be, but just being a really dynamic route runner, being able to make plays after the catch and work that intermediate kind of range of the field, I think will be huge for this.
Not enough people are talking about Keandre Lambert-Smith. And when he committed to Auburn out of the transfer portal, we kind of got up here and said, this kid's probably playing in the NFL if he had competent quarterback playing a competent offense in the 2023 year. That's how good we think Keandre Lambert-Smith is. As Michigan fans ourselves, we've seen plenty of Keandre Lambert-Smith at Penn State. All the hype wants to go to Cam Coleman. Again, we understand the hype. We're college football fans too. We bang the table for the true freshman.
Cam Coleman needs to give him what he can give him, which is that ability to take the top off, because their inability to play outside of a phone booth was a huge problem.
That's what I want to dive into with this wide receiver, is kind of the different roles that these wide receivers play in this Auburn offense. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. You go back to last year, they just had no space to operate because teams didn't really think Auburn could push the ball down the field. Quite frankly, they couldn't. Not only did Peyton Thorne struggle a little bit down the field, but I think more importantly, there just wasn't a pass catcher that inspired any sort of fear within opposing defenses. So what did Auburn see on the offense side of the football? They just saw a lot of box safeties, a lot of 7-8 man boxes, because again, when Auburn didn't have that vertical threat, it got really hard for Auburn to run an offense. What are the roles that these wide receivers play? That Cam Coleman's your vertical guy. I mean, there's just not many defensive backs in the SEC that are going to be able to run with Cam Coleman and then compete with Cam Coleman at the catch point. you're going to need to put a safety over top of him, which is going to open it up for a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith, who excels in that short intermediate passing attack. Robert Lewis as well, but I think also Rivaldo Fairweather in the run game. So I think one of the biggest storylines in terms of the wide receiver room that you're looking for is, can Cam Coleman truly be that vertical threat, that wide receiver one that defenses need to respect when they play Auburn? Now, I think the next interesting kind of, I'll say position battle, but more what I'm interested in is the rotation is on the defensive line, and particularly on the inside of the defensive line. I mean, I think Hugh Freeze did a phenomenal job just getting the depth right. And you saw a lot of different programs try to kind of go after a big dog, a guy like Dominic Williams, Derek Carmen. Hugh Freeze kind of went the other way and said, hey, we're just going to go out and get 4 or 5 really quality interior defensive linemen. They did exactly that. Now, I think the question is for fall camp is, how does this rotation kind of shake out for Auburn, specifically on the inside of the defensive line? I'll kind of kick it to you. Which player on the inside do you have your eyes on for Auburn in 2024?
And to me, I think it's Philip Leedy. I think, again,
Yes.
You kind of look, and I'll be kind of honest, I don't see this defensive line, or I kind of look, I think Auburn's kind of made their talent kind of what it should be in a lot of areas on this team. You see that secondary, the way they're recruiting high school or high schoolers, the way they're developing guys like Kay and Lee and some of those others. That kind of looks like an SEC secondary, if you will. Linebacker room, kind of the same. I think this defensive line is that one position this year that I kind of look at and say, I don't think this is what an Auburn defensive line is going to look like in 3 years. And obviously you see what they're doing on the recruiting trail, what they just did over that Big Cat weekend. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more talent, but Philip Leedy is the one guy I look at and say, well, he has kind of the talent I think Auburn's going to be frankly looking for. And that's not to take away from guys like Jason Jones and Isaiah Rakes. Those guys are good at what they do. They're going to play physical. They're going to be really tough. They're going to eat blocks up and let the linebackers play free. But I'm kind of looking, who are you going to be your playmakers in the middle? Aside from Philip Leedy, I think you have some questions about who's.
So 2 things I would agree with you on. One is Auburn's defensive line is going to be a heck of a lot better over the next couple of years. I mean, guys like Malik Autry, Antonio Coleman coming in. Hugh Freeze not getting enough credit in terms of what he's doing recruiting the defensive line position out of high school. I think that's accurate. That being said, where I'll push back is I'm not as out on this defensive line, specifically on the inside. We should probably preface, we like the edge room a lot. Yeah. Now, on the inside of the defensive line, again, is there a game wrecker, a top 100 NFL draft pick on the inside? Probably not, but Isaiah Rakes is going to give you that kind of that zero. That is, he's a build like a fire hydrant. Right? He's a 6'1", he's 325 pounds. He's not going to be a guy that fills the stat sheet, but I think he's an SEC quality interior defensive lineman. You noted it best. Philip Leedy, probably the highest upside. Trill Carter's fascinating. Like, Trill Carter played good football at Minnesota in 2022, transferred to Texas, didn't get on the field that much. What kind of version do we get of Trill Carter? That's something that I'm looking at during fall camp.
He was a guy who made plays, and I agree with you. I think it's not going to be a bad unit. I don't mean to say that, but is it going to be a really good unit? That's where I think, again, I kind of have my questions. Like, again, Rakes, Jason Jones, they'll do their thing. They'll play their part on the defense. But do you have your Derek Brown type guys, some of those guys for Auburn you've seen?
Yeah.
You can go back to Nick Fairley if you like, some of those real unique difference makers. I just think that's where I kind of look at this defensive line and say, on the interior, I think they have their guys on the edge to do it. Who's going to be that kind of guy? That's kind of my question.
They're coming. They're coming. That's what Auburn fans would say. They might not be here in the 2024 season. Antonio Coleman and Malik Autry, they coming for sure. Now, I think the last quote-unquote position battle that I would like to talk about before we get into breakout players, which is kind of the highlight for me of the show, talking about the young cats that I think are going to break out. Let's go to the secondary room, where I think you look at the boundary quarterback position and say we feel pretty good about Kane, Lee, and Keontae Scott. Actually, I think you feel really good about your 2 starting boundary quarterbacks. I think the rest of the question marks are, how does the safety and nickelback room kind of shake out? Jaron Thompson is going to be a bona fide starter in my opinion. He's played just so much football at Texas. He's so versatile, can do a lot of different things. I think the ideal kind of safety for DJ Durkin and Charles Kelly in terms of getting versatile, asking to do a lot of different things. Dill, if I were to ask you, who's the guy in fall camp in the back end of the Auburn defense that you think emerges as a potential starter for this Auburn program in 2024?
It's got to be Terrence Love for me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
He played pretty good football as a true freshman. I think a guy who is pretty unique. I think he can play that nickel. I think he can play that safety, gives him that versatility. I think he's going to be a guy who will carve out a niche. And I'm not sure he'll start because, again, there's some good players. Jaron Thompson's going to play a lot. Antonio Kite, good, like decent guys kind of sitting in waiting in the wings. Caleb Wooden, I certainly should mention. I think he can play. But I do think Terrence Love can work something out or make something happen.
Terrence Love, and I would love to hear the Auburn fans. This might be a hot take. I think he might be the most physically gifted defensive back in this Auburn room. Now, is he going to put it together going into year 2? That's probably the question. But you said it best, because of the versatility. I mean, he can come up and play the star. He can play both safety positions. There's a lot of different things that you can do.
He can cover. That's the big thing. I think he can like legit play man coverage in the pinches they need him to play.
And that's going to be important for safeties. I'm happy you noted that. Man coverage for the safety is going to be important because DJ Durkin wants to bring pressure. And when you bring pressure with your front seven, you got to have safeties that can hold up in man coverage. Terrence Love, a guy that can do that. Dill, let's fast forward here to the breakout players. Let's go back to the offensive side of the football. If there's one player that you really want to kind of hear is taking over fall camp for this Auburn program, who's it going to be on the offensive side of the football?
I think Percy Lewis is the guy I'm kind of looking for. I think you kind of saw like good moments at Mississippi State, and he kind of does a little different. Probably not like the premier athlete, but when you have that type of size and you can get on guys and move them off the ball, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And frankly, I think with the way Auburn might want to run the ball, given how good I think this offensive line will be, especially on the left side, I think that Percy Lewis kind of fits this probably better than what he did at Mississippi State, which was much more spread, much more in space. I don't think that was necessarily Percy Lewis's game. I'm kind of excited to see what they'll do with him in that run game in blowing guys off the ball. Him and Dylan Wade can be a problem because Dylan Wade's built to be a guard.
What I love about Percy Lewis coming in is, one, I think he's a starting caliber left tackle in the SEC. I think he showed as much at Mississippi State. I think you get better at both positions because then you kick Dylan Wade into the guard spot where, look, Dylan Wade was a dang good tackle for Auburn in 2023. We all know his best position was on the inside of the offensive line. You bring in Percy Lewis, so I think you kind of hold serve at left tackle. You get a road grader in the run game in Percy Lewis, but then you get to kick Dylan Wade into guard, which he's going to even be better than he was at left tackle. Then you talk about Connor Lew at center. I look at the left side of this Auburn offensive line and say it has the chance to be really good for Auburn in 2024 if Percy Lewis comes in and is that guy. I think that's a massive, massive shout out. Now, Dill, on the offensive side of the football, for me, I want to just give a little bit of love to Jeremiah Cobb, one of my favorite running backs coming out in 2023. Make no mistake about it, Jarquez Hunter is going to be our guy. He is one of, if not the best running back in the SEC. I think the bigger question is who's going to be running back 2. But more importantly, I mean, Jeremiah Cobb can affect the game in a lot of different ways. I mean, getting him out in space, using him as a pass catcher. He's a guy that goes sub-11 in the 100-meter dash. I am excited to see him going into year 2. We all knew that he would need a year to get a little bit more weight on, get that SEC physicality. Hugh Freeze is salivating in terms of how you want to use Jeremiah Cobb. I think going into year 2, you're going to see him get a little bit more involved on the offense. Going to the defensive side of the football, I'm going to take the reins here, Dill. And let's talk about this Auburn edge room. And I want to go to Amaris Williams. The Auburn fans have been rocking with the boys for the last 12 months. No, ever since Amaris Williams flipped his commitment back in December on signing, I've been just banging the table for this kid. I think he is special from a physical trait standpoint. You know, kind of similar to Keldrick Falk, where it's just you looked at him on the high school film and said, that's a guy that is ready to play year 1. Amaris Williams is going to be my guy that I'm listening to in fall camp.
And frankly, I think that's one of the, you hear Hugh Freeze talk about it. Well, we're going to have some freshmen be pressed into duty. I think the secondary room, you might see it. The defensive end room, 100% you're going to see it because you kind of look. I don't think you're super deep. You have 2 top-end guys who are, when we talk about like kind of the SEC talent, I think the way Auburn's going to want their defensive linemen to look, Jalen McLeod and Keldrick Falk are certainly those type of guys. But again, aside from those 2, I don't know that you have that much in the pipeline. You do have Amaris Williams and you have Jamonte Waller. I think both are going to play a lot. And frankly, I think you go to that spring game and both look physically ready. And Amaris Williams probably a little bit of a higher upside, a little bit more unique athletic traits, a little bit longer, maybe a little bit more explosive. But make no mistake, Javonte Waller is going to hold his own because he's strong as Knox, and I think he does a really good job of playing physical at that defense.
And I would throw in Kieran Crawford coming from Arkansas State as well. I mean, that was an extremely productive group of 5 player that we're going to get a sense of what he's like in SEC competition. Another couple of breakout players that are freshmen, DeMarcus Riddick, DJ Barber. I thought DJ Barber looked awesome in the spring game, but I think more importantly, you look at Auburn's defense in the linebacker room, Austin Keys, Eugene Asante, starting linebackers, no question about that. I think it's up for grabs in terms of linebacker 3 and 4 in this Auburn team. I think DeMarcus Riddick and DJ Barber, at least one of them, might have a shot to kind of insert themselves into the rotation at some point during this 2024 season. But fall camp is going to be that time that we start figuring out which true freshmen are going to be consistent enough for Auburn to rely on in 2024.
And DJ Barber, I thought especially looked like awesome spring game. And again, maybe not a guy who was headlining that Auburn class last year, but you saw him come in, look really, really good, especially in that red zone where it gets tight and you want a big physical linebacker. I thought that's kind of where he was looking the part and looking really good. And I think, again, the way teams rotate linebackers nowadays, I don't think you see that old, like, okay, one linebacker plays the whole game. They kind of rotated almost like a defensive line. So, again, you kind of look, I think you do have your 2 guys, but I think DJ Barber especially can carve out a niche playing in that red zone area. And when they need tough physical linebacker play, I think you can get.
We just saw DJ Durkin lean on Torian York heavy in 2023, a true freshman linebacker. He ain't afraid to get a true freshman linebacker some buzz. You see a lot of programs and defensive coordinators and play callers kind of shy away from playing the young cats. That's not something DJ Durkin does. So if you are good enough, whether you're 17 years old, 18 years old, if you're good enough to play, you're going to play. That's
Hugh Freeze, for that matter. He'll play the freshman. He already said he'll play the freshman.
Very good point. That'll do it, though. I think this is a fascinating team in terms of fall camp storylines. We're going to have a lot to talk about over the next couple of weeks. We'll cut it there again. To the Auburn fans, been a blast talking this program. The amount of support you guys have shown, it's been amazing. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.